So that will concentrate the animals around the water that stays. So around sort of the Gowrie waterhole and around Biffle's Hook. And we're going to pop back to Jamie, who's still with the elephants, and we'll carry on looking for that leopard and see you a little bit later.
Hi guys, welcome back. As you can see, we're still with these elephants. They changed direction slightly from where I thought they were going to be, but while I was maneuvering around, I actually discovered the rest of the herd is also here. So there are more just off to my left here, so tucked away in the slightly thicker bush. So we've got the rest of the herd over here, hiding this way. And this group was originally coming in this direction, but then the female changed her mind and is sort of just meandering, looking for the best bushes to eat. So I hear you guys have been catching up with James about his trip to Russia and how things have changed now that he's back. Let's see if we can get a little bit of a better view of these elephants in here.
Leaving the water hole over the mud, and that's why it's bouncing about a bit. And on our way to see if we can't find those leopard tracks again. So we're pretty much in the middle of the reserve now. Little Whitey drains line off to our right hand side, which I'm reliably told floods at least once a year. That will be fascinating to see. It's almost impossible to conceive of it this time of the year when everything is turning so dry. It was a very beautiful misty morning, which we didn't really see because we were with the hyenas, but obviously we could see it. And the winter grass at this time of the year, especially when it's a bit moist, gives off a really gorgeous kind of strawy scent. And it always reminds me of my childhood when we used to travel to the mountains sort of around this time of the year, or a bit later in the year, and that dry sort of red thatching grass all over the Drakensberg mountains that is a very sort of it evokes a strong memory whenever I smell it. Chandra, can you? I'll probably run them over. The tracks here of a water monitor or a water monitor lizard. Can you see them there? I'm just going to jump out the car. Right? Can you hear me, Gendre? Gendre can hear me. Can you see me? Okay, right. So here you can see the tracks of a monitor lizard. You may have seen me suddenly stop and look around. That's because I failed to do so as I got out of the vehicle, which of course in this area is a little dangerous. You do need to be aware all the time. This monitor lizard, I think, walks an astonishing distance. He comes seemingly across the road towards that twin dams and goes up to Gowrie Dam, and that's a distance of about 2 kilometers. Now, water monitor lizard's about that big, and this is his tail dragging along the road, and it's not easy for them to move along the road. The way I mean, the reason I know it's not a snake, I mean, I can tell that immediately at the moment, but if you were to come across it and you were stranded in the African wilderness and were terrified that a mamba was about to set on you, you can tell, of course, because it does have feet. Can you see this, Chandra? There are feet marks there next to the tail. Now, it's all very well for an animal that size to walk 2.5 kilometers, but a monitor lizard has got mean, it's got to drag quite a lot of its body along the ground, so it's energetically extremely expensive, and I don't know why it's doing this. It does it often, all the way along this road. It tends to come this way and then go back again, and it really is interesting to me that a monitor lizard wouldn't stay in one sort of section of water. I shall have to look that up. Right. So still no leopard tracks, but we do have monitor lizard tracks. Maybe we'll find the monitor lizard, Chandra. Put my earpiece in, otherwise Tara shan't be able to talk to me.
Hello everyone. Being out in the bush and being out there live has its technical challenges. We're experiencing some of that now and are working on it as fast as possible.
Hello everybody, sorry about that. I think you lost us briefly. Not sure why. Eugene, of course, is selfishly, after about 7 nights of work non-stop, decided to take some leave. So we'll have to make sure that doesn't ever happen again. So apparently there was a comment that maybe the leopard, the lizard has a girlfriend at another waterhole. It's possible, but that's quite a long distance relationship that they're trying to maintain. So a very sad situation appears to have occurred or developed in my absence, and that is that the great bachelor of Buffels Hook, the hippopotamus, disappeared, as has his girlfriend. And I don't know if you remember, but just before I left, Scott found two hippo fighting at night, and we think Bob was probably one of those. So where he's absconded to, we don't know. Very sad state of affairs. And Edward, perhaps when I go back to Buffels Hook to find the animal with which I share so much, I feel, in terms of psychology and personal back. Stop up here. Andre, can you get a look into the top of that dead tree there? Can you see what I'm looking at? Mm-hmm. There's some greenery. Anna Marie, you want to know, or you've made the comment that it must be difficult for animals to find water this time of year. Absolutely it is. It's not impossible though. There's quite a lot of water around here, and a lot more than there would be naturally without human beings. There's also a very large river to the south of us called the Sand River. and animals can go to and from that river quite comfortably. Now what we're looking at there is a leopard orchid, or Ancelia gigantica, and the reason I've stopped to look at it is because the canes, which are the sort of stems of that plant, are very water rich, and so things like baboons and monkeys will probably go and eat them if it gets particularly dry. And they like to grow on trees like that. They get their nutrition not from the tree at all, but from the air and from bits and pieces that land in the sort of, it forms like a basket. You can see there that it's got a sort of basket, and any detritus that falls in it, it will eventually rot and form nutrients for the tree. Not for the tree, for the orchid. The leopard orchid. And it's supposed to be quite sweet. You read in books that they're quite sweet. So we're going to go quickly across to Jamie, who's, I think she's with the elephant still, but I think they're crossing the boundary. So I'll see you just now.
Difficult.
Welcome back, guys, and I do apologize for the gremlins work. So I'm going to stay as still as possible while I'm here, and unfortunately while you guys were gone, our Ellies started crossing across to our northern boundary, and they look like they're going to be disappearing off fairly soon. But we do apologize once again for our technical issues. Apparently the elephants are here in quite a bad signal area, so I'm going to remain as still as possible, just so that I don't disappear on you again, and we can say a final farewell to this wonderful elephant herd. While you guys were with James, I did actually spot a young female whose trunk is considerably shortened. Now, I don't know, of course, exactly how she got that injury. I have my suspicions. But she did give us quite the farewell. As I drove away, she decided she wanted to come after me. And it's always a good practice in that circumstance to let her, to stop the car and to not drive away, because you don't want to teach these animals that chasing cars is acceptable behavior. So things that are poisonous and that certain animals are adapted to eat. So a millipede's taste buds would probably be adapted to allow it to ignore that kind of taste and to not see it as any kind of threat to them. So different animals will have different kinds of taste buds, but as far as I know, at least all mammals definitely do. And bear in mind that a lot of the animals, or all of the animals, will have that organ of Jacobson, which is specialized in terms of smell, but it will also enhance the taste. So once something is in the animal's mouth, it will start interpreting those smells as almost a taste mechanism. So yes, all animals have taste buds, or at least all mammals do. Not so sure about something like a fish, but it makes sense that they might. I think we're going to be seeing the last of these Ellies disappearing off into this block. They're not in any kind of hurry. They're just having quite a leisurely morning. Just while I'm thinking about taste buds and various toxic substances, it's important to remember that all animals are adapted to eating different plants, and we shouldn't necessarily assume that what is safe for them to eat is safe for us to eat. So elephants, for example, are more than capable of eating tambuti, and do so on occasion, and so do animals like black rhino. But it is something that is highly, highly toxic to humans, and that we will not eat. And if you do, there is a very good chance that you will die, even if you cook on wood. So if you make a fire with wood collected from a tambuti tree, which I'll keep an eye out for later, if you cook on that wood, it produces highly toxic fumes that will make you very, very ill, possibly throwing up, and potentially even kill you. And then something like a poison apple plant is also highly toxic. It's part of the tomato plant family, very similar looking plant, but it is highly, highly toxic. But there are a lot of animals out in the bush that are capable, more than capable, of eating it. If you are ever stuck out in the bush and you're not entirely sure if something is safe to eat, it is always better to err on the side of caution. But if you are desperate, you can start by rubbing a little bit on the sensitive patch of skin, like on the inside of your arm, just to monitor if you have any kind of reaction. And maybe dab a little bit on your tongue and then leave it for a long time, just to see if there is any kind of reaction. And if there is, then that particular plant type or plant material is not safe to be eaten. So guys, I think that our ellies have disappeared off into the block. This will probably be the last of our sighting, so it might be time to just move on and see what else we can find. This cut line is turning out to be quite productive, so I have high hopes. Let's see what else we can see. Well, something else new and exciting to show you, to send you back to James, who is currently exploring up a tree. Our sky's a little bit later. Enjoy.
I don't know if I can get there. That's got really swords. Hello everybody. The reason I'm up here is that I was trying to get a piece of that leopard orchid. I got a quarter of the way up the trunk, and then I said, no, I don't think I can do this. And Gendre basically played on my masculine ego, and now I find myself a fairly terrifying distance off the floor, and I'm not in fact going to go any further than I am now, certainly not while I'm on camera, because while it might be amusing for some to see me plummet 5 meters to the ground, I feel it's not necessarily the reason behind which we do Wild Earth. So I'll tell you a bit about the tree that I'm in, and then I have mentioned it before, but the leopard orchid is a very traditional, apparently used traditionally if you are in my current position, which is of course a state of abject bachelorhood. And what you do is you pick a piece off the leopard orchid like that, one of those canes, and you chew it, and it's supposed to be quite sweet. The one that I have tried tasted very bitter and unpleasant, a bit like my love life, and the reason that you do that is that you're supposed to do it at the full moon, and say the name of the one you want, of course, and she will immediately drop whatever she's doing, think of you, and never think of anything else. I have found this to be, on the say 150 or so times that I've tried it, not to be true, in fact. So that's why I came up here. I haven't tried it yet at Djuma. I'm standing in a leadwood tree, and leadwood, of course, this tree's probably been dead for a long time. It has a density of just over 1,000 kilograms per cubic meter. So what that means is that a cubic meter will weigh about a ton. and that's the same density as water, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, that's absolutely correct, as pure water. And so these trees stand for huge amounts of time before they rot and fall over. And as I'm standing here, there are bits and pieces of the tree that have been eaten by or drilled into by woodpeckers and wood borer beetles, but the fungus and things that generally would cause something like a marula tree to rot and then fall over don't tend to occur so much in a tree like this. The dense wood, of course, also makes it excellent firewood, and the ash is very good for tooth cleaning, when I believe Brent has used it on drive before, which is a good thing for Brent. He tends to use sort of natural hygiene as his general modus operandi. I am because I'm stuck up here now, I'm going to ask Tara remotely to try and link back to Jamie if she has signal, because I don't feel that you should be subjected to watching me trying to get out of this tree. So we'll just have a slight listen to what's going on, and then I will descend from the boughs of this magnificent Combretum imberbe. You can also hear some ground hornbills calling off to the east. And so we're going to go across to Jamie now, thankfully, and I'll see you just a little bit later, hopefully with all limbs still intact.
So guys, welcome back. I will be keeping you entertained while James finds his way out of his predicament, which I think is fairly hilarious, and I'm going to tease him about it mercilessly when we get back. But very entertaining, and I suppose I can't really stand on a high horse here because I've been stuck in my fair share of trees during my life, and fallen out of my fair share of trees as well. So at least he didn't go tumbling to the ground. But never fear, I'm sure that he will work his way down slowly and carefully. Perhaps he just would like to do so without an audience. So I'm still on the cut line between Djuma and Hook. Just looking around, you never know. That cheetah was in the area a couple of days ago and has been around here for a few days. So I'm just keeping my eyes peeled. You never know, you might get lucky. And I'm sure you guys all appreciate the extremes to which the presenters will go to give you guys a wonderful drive every single morning and every single afternoon. David in Michigan. Hi David, welcome to the show, welcome to the Sunrise Safari. David would like to know, posing a very, very tricky question, what percentage of the Sabi Sands plants are actually edible? Now I'm going to work on the assumption he means edible to the animals in this area. And I need to think about this for a little bit, because I would say the percentage is very, very high. And also, of course, it is seasonal. And then you also get the percentage of plants of the plant itself. So one single plant, like a piece of grass, which I'm looking for a good example now. So I would say a very, very high percentage of, and probably every single plant is edible to something out here. So 100% edible rate. I know that there's not much that snacks on magic worries, but it does just depend on the type of animal and how it's adapted, and that makes sense because you need a wide spectrum of animals being able to utilize every aspect of this environment so that they're not in competition too much. at the moment, because it is winter and the grasses are very dry, it's more the certain species of grass that actually have a high nutritional content, and especially towards the sort of growth points of the grass. And a lot of the stuff on top is very dry and really lacking in any kind of nutritional potential. But it is still edible. It wouldn't cause any harm to the animals that might eat it. It just won't necessarily provide them with what they need. You will see that things like elephants will favor different trees at different times of year. So very soon, as we start to move into spring, the knob thorns in this area will start to get their leaves, and they will start to be targeted by things such as elephants. Lost some of you while we were going through, so apologies for that. Don't worry, you didn't miss anything serious. I wasn't saying anything just in case we did lose you. And I'm driving along this cut line and I'm seeing something interesting that I didn't expect to see, and it's making me think maybe I should change my direction. So I've picked up on a couple of big lion tracks. They disappeared at the moment, but I'm sure I saw them just now, and I might have to turn around and go and double check that dam again just in case I missed something. We were chatting a little bit earlier about animal taste buds, and Jody has actually looked up some information on fish taste buds. So thank you very much for doing that, Jody. Jody tells me that fish do not have taste buds, which was what I sort of thought was the case. It was ringing bells in the back of my mind. So they have incredible sense of smell, but they do not have taste buds. So very interesting there, and I suppose that makes sense, especially if they've got a good sense of smell to compensate for their lack of taste. Learning something new every day. While I'm driving around and exploring this area, Lisa would like to know if we ever see ospreys in this area. So I'm assuming she's talking about the big raptor, and I will just stop here so I can show you guys a picture of what we are talking about. So as it happens at the moment, I haven't seen an osprey yet, although I'm sure that they are around. So an osprey is a bird that specializes in fishing generally. So in the same way a fish eagle does. So there we have a picture of an osprey, and it is a very uncommon bird, and it is a migrant bird, so we wouldn't be seeing them at this time of year usually, but generally a bird that favors the sort of river areas and more common around the coastal areas, just where they can go and specialize in catching fish. So I'm sure that there are cases of ospreys being seen in the Sabi Sands. I haven't seen any, and I've actually been living in and around this area for close to, or just over 3 years now, and I've only ever seen one once. So, but they are around, and very, very similar to the African fish eagle. So they occupy a similar niche in terms of being birds, raptors that are specialized in fishing. And I have seen plenty of fish eagle, or at least heard plenty of fish eagle in this area. So they are around capitalizing on the dams. So we do get ospreys, not very often, and not at this time of year, but very beautiful birds and fascinating to see. So guys, now that we've finished talking about ospreys, we're going to pass back to James, who will not know that he is on air. So we are going to play a trick on him. We're going to crash cut back to James and get a little bit of an idea of how his descent from the tree is going. I'll be with you guys a bit later. Welcome back, guys. So being a little bit sneaky, just trying to watch James in the hope that he might do something a little bit hilarious during his descent from that tree. But it seems as though he's a little bit more coordinated than we expected, and he's making his way down fairly free from harm. So I've just been listening while you guys were watching James struggle with his tree climbing expedition. I was just listening to the that I saw going back towards the dam was slightly older, and they are still tracking the Birmingham males to the north of us, where I saw them cross through into that lock. So they are still off our property. They might have been doing a little bit of pacing during the night, just exploring the various areas. These guys now are old enough that they're going to start, they're not quite old enough to really start competing for territory, although never say never. But I think they are just exploring the various options. And in 2 years' time, I saw those, after yesterday morning's drive, I actually went to go and have a look at these lions. It's the first time I've ever seen them. And I can see that in 2 years' time, they are going to be a serious force to be reckoned with. They are very big lions, still quite young, but in 2 years' time it's going to be a very interesting development. But still fascinating to watch the way that the pride dynamics work over the next few months, just in terms of those males coming and going throughout the area. So what I want to do now, since the Birmingham boys have crossed north, I want to just loop around and see if there's any tracks for the Djuma Pride coming through from where I last saw them cross into across our eastern boundary. I'm just curious to see if they're going to start moving back now that those males have moved out of the area. Was, as I understand it, James was climbing up into the tree to get you guys a sample of that orchid, and I am very curious to know if he ever got it in the end, but I'm sure you guys can let me know if he managed. Since I've just asked that question, apparently James has made his descent and he is made it back to his car. So let's see if he managed to accomplish his original mission that he set out for, and I will be back with you guys just a little bit later.
Hello everybody. Thankfully I'm not lying in a sort of pile underneath the tree. I managed to get down, and you'll be pleased to know that we've managed to get a piece of leopard orchid. Now, these are not the parts that we wanted to get in order to sort of stave off bachelorhood. Thank you for all of your concern about and comments about whether the fire department was going to come and help me out. We are in fact the fire department, so no, that wasn't going to happen. Elephants, no, I'd probably stay up there if an elephant came past, and Jean-Dre would probably have driven off. And so basically what we did while I was standing up there, Jean-Dre threw me a stick and I managed to knock off this bulb. I was hoping to try and get a piece of the cane. So these leaves here that you can see grow on something called a cane, which is a sort of succulent stick, if you like, succulent stem, and that's what you're supposed to eat on if you are wanting to stave off bachelorhood. This unfortunately was a sort of a sad collateral damage that came off. The orchid come the summertime will produce lots of these. This is a sort of remnant from last summer. Will produce lots of these that will eventually form the beautiful flowers, and I'm pretty sure that they're seeds. Sorry, this won't form a flower. This was a flower. So this will be the seeds that will probably eventually be transferred by baboons and monkeys that come to eat them, and probably the odd bird too, and they'll take them off and drop them in other trees where they sit, either in their dung or maybe just from their mouths, and that's how the Ancelia will move around and reseed in other trees. Not very common in this area, much more common in areas where there are mapani trees, which tend to form, they've got a much softer heartwood, and so trees like that can establish, or orchids like that can establish in them. Because this leadwood is so old, there are pieces of hollowness in which the orchid can now live. Doesn't smell great. I'm joking, it's not really. It tastes exactly like the cane does. Right. So, John Boy and Bulleray, thank you for your screen grabs and comments about my descent from the tree. I am a tree hugger when faced with a 5-meter plummet to the earth and a lot of spike thorn trees underneath it. And you will see quite nicely that the inappropriate khaki I'm wearing is beautifully camouflaged against the sort of light grey of that leadwood tree. Right, so that's enough of the leopard orchid, I feel, for today. Let's go and see if we can find a leopard. Jean-Dre, by the way, was very helpful during that episode. He offered to stand underneath and allow me to fall onto him. I suspect he'd have stepped out of the way. He's got that sort of glint in his eye. And he also threw up the sticks. It was just a slight bit too far for me to actually climb. I was too scared. Right, I wonder if we can get out of here. There we go. I see a path. I know of one other really nice leopard orchid that I think is a bit closer to the ground. So at some stage I will retrieve a cane from there. Heart rate is beating, somewhat nervous. If we do have any young viewers, please just remember that don't go into the bush and start eating food, or just eating bits of plants, because you can find poisonous plants in the wild sometimes. I'm pretty sure this isn't a poisonous one. And we're going to just pop across to Jamie at the moment. She's got some mammals, and I'm going to continue looking for these leopard tracks, and we'll see you a little bit later.
Hi guys, and as you can see, welcome back. We are stuck at a zebra crossing, ha ha ha. So we've got the stallion here with the rest of his herd just off to the left, and he showed us quite nicely that very, very thin, fine black line just between the cheeks of his bottom, which tells us he's a male. And there we have the rest of his herd. So we have a dazzle of zebra. They always are very photogenic and beautiful to see in this morning light. And actually, interestingly, just off to the left, and I will move forward in a moment so that we can have a proper look, there's a herd of what appears to be edge forward slightly. I just don't want to disturb the stallion that's standing in the road. However, they do seem fairly comfortable, so I'm just going to shift forward. Zebra are amazing animals and very, as I mentioned, very, very striking. And one of the very common questions that I often get when I am taking people for their first time out on safari is, can you ride a zebra? Because obviously they do look so similar to horses. And the answer is no, you can't. It's not good for them. They're not bred up in the same way that domestic horses are to carry that weight on their back, or for something like a donkey or a mule. And you would actually potentially injure them. So they're not built for riding, they're built for surviving out in the wild. And they can be actually very good at defending themselves from the various predators. They can kick very effectively, and they have the most incredible incisor combination that they use both to bite off the grass but also to defend and bite both each other in serious fights and predators. And very often if you see a zebra with a stumpy tail, which none of these guys have at the moment, but that's usually caused not by a lucky escape from a lion or hyena, as is commonly thought, but actually by the other zebras fighting. So when two stallions fight, when a stallion is trying to establish himself as a dominant male or to gather his own herd when he reaches sexual maturity, he'll go and fight another stallion. And if that stallion loses, he will pass on potentially his least favorite mare. Oh, hello, boy. I'm coming to say hello. So he will either pass on his least favorite mare, so the mare that he has had for the shortest time in his herd, or one of his daughters. And the first mare that he acquires will always be the highest in the ranking system of his family, and she will be the one that leads the way through the paths and decides which way they go, and the stallion will follow right at the back, as he's doing right now, to form a sort of protective defense from the rear. And I have seen one rather sad sighting where the hyena had caught a zebra foal and had dragged it into the dam, which hyenas often do. They seem to like the sogginess of the meat, maybe just to store it for later consumption. And they were lying on top of the zebra foal, and the whole herd was surrounding them, and every now and again the stallion would try and rush forward just to chase them off the foal, and the hyenas would then have to chase him away again. So they can be very protective and very defensive. And at the back there you can see the male waterbuck is about 5, 6, 7. You can see at least 7, potentially more. So nice to see such a big bachelor herd out here. I'm just going to move forward so that we can have a closer look at one of the waterbuck. Here you can see one of the nice big males, and these are all adult males, fairly large in size. And the waterbuck are one of the biggest antelope that we do find out here. And they've got that incredibly shaggy fur that looks actually quite cuddly and soft. But it's there for a reason, and it's there because, as their name suggests, they do often favor the river areas of the environment that they live in. And they'll spend quite a lot of time in the water, so that thick fur just insulates them. And when you do drive past a large group of waterbuck, if you drive through or if they run past you, you get the whiff of their very, very pungent odor. And it does smell very strongly, almost like a wet dog. Yeah, I would describe it as a wet dog smell. And it is very, very pungent, and that comes from the oil that they secrete. It helps to just waterproof that thick fur, because as you can imagine, having that thick fur become waterlogged isn't ideal. So they do secrete oil just to keep it nice and fresh and to stop it from getting bogged down by all the water. And that characteristic white ring around the bum, it just serves as when the antelope are running away from a threat, just so that they can keep an eye on where each other are going, and then also as a flash coloration technique, so the predator's eyes might focus on that and become a little bit disoriented when they're chasing them down. think this might be the biggest bachelor herd of waterbuck I've ever seen, which is nice to see. And there's a very common myth that goes around the bush that lions do not target waterbuck because they don't like the smell and that it makes their meat taste funny. It's not true at all, and in fact in certain areas, for example the area that I was working in, waterbuck served as a very, very common, one of the most common prey species for lions, just because it is a fair-sized antelope, so for the bigger prides it will provide them with enough food. And there they go, disappearing off into this block, and they're not going to pop back out, so I think we can start moving on. Just keep an eye out for those lion tracks. I'm now checking the eastern boundary of Djuma, just to see. This is where I last saw tracks for a lion pride moving across, and that was about 2 or so days ago. So I still want to just check and see if there are any in this area or if they have been around. I'm interested to just know what their response has been to the presence of the Birmingham boys on Djuma. So without any further procrastination, let us see what we can find. And to see waterbuck and zebra like that together in a big group is very, very common. There's a big social aggregation like that. And it just means that there's extra sets of eyes and ears and a sense of smell on alert for any kind of threat. So it does work to their advantage to have to feed around in larger numbers. Got some interesting questions from Sibusiso, the black mamba. Welcome to the Sunrise Safari. Thank you for joining us. It's great to have you. And Sibusiso would like to take us back to the elephant sighting that we had when we were talking about the very thick skin. And he would like to know if the skin is thick enough that a bite from a snake, such as a black mamba, could not penetrate it. Yes, most likely, especially in adult elephants, the snake's fangs would struggle to pierce that thick area of skin. But as far as I know, it's not impossible, especially for baby elephants whose skin is not quite as thick. And I believe that there have been 1 or 2 recorded cases of elephants being bitten by snakes. But again, not very common, not something that I would say happens very often. And also bear in mind that snakes will generally go out of their way to stay away from elephants moving through, and they will pick up on those vibrations through the ground as the elephants walk. They'll pick up on those very easily and move out of their way before they feel threatened in any way. Probably more likely to happen would be if an elephant extends its trunk into the wrong place, and then maybe with that sensitive skin on the inside of the trunk, potentially you could have a snake bite from there. And then carrying on from the snake venom question, Sibusiso would like to know if snakes are immune to each other's venom or to other species of snake's venom. So there will be certain species of snake will be immune to their own species venom, but as far as I know, other species of snake could still be affected by different types of venom. So for example, if a black mamba bit something like a puff adder, it would be affected by that venom and would potentially be killed. interesting questions about snakes, and I'm going to have to go back and read up a little bit more about that. I'm actually curious to know exactly how that whole process works. Very interesting to just wonder about that sort of thing. And there are certain snakes that do feed or specialize in feeding on other snakes. But while I'm pondering that particular question, I'm going to send you back to to James, to see what he's been up to since his tree climbing expeditions.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Wendy. We have failed to find any leopard tracks, I'm afraid, but this is the area where we heard that male calling, and so we're just going to stay in and around here for the next little while. So I believe you've been discussing some snakes with Jamie, and discussing various bits and pieces. And Jenny has asked the question as to whether the hyenas would be at any kind of danger from snakes. So whether the hyena cubs would be in any danger from snakes. Yes, they would, Jenny, but not from probably the snakes you're thinking of. The main danger for a hyena cub when the babies are away would be maybe from a python, which might go into a hole like that and investigate it. A hyena cub like that is probably a bit big for something like a mamba to choose to eat. So a mamba is the next biggest snake, which they'll get up to 4 meters, and it could eat something the size of that baby hyena. So it might be something of a danger, but not a huge one. Now, for most other snakes that live in termite mounds, so a cobra might go into a termite mound to spend some time there, but if a cobra went in there and found the hyena, and the hyena didn't move, it would be highly unlikely that the cobra would just bite the hyena for the sake of it, then turn around and leave. Remember that it's incredibly expensive for a snake to produce venom. That venom is a very complicated protein, and it's very expensive, and they only really want to use it if they absolutely have to. So mainly when they want to eat something, or if they are in really mortal danger. So were they to go to that den and find those sub-adult hyenas there, probably turn around and go away rather than bite them. So, but a python, of course, which is enormous, may well see that very small cub as something of a meal. So, Jenny, I hope that answers your question. Right, nice question from Sherry in Ohio. Thanks, Sherry. If I plant this bulb here, will it in fact grow into another leopard orchid? Sherry, the reason I haven't thrown it away is I'm going to try and find an appropriate spot to put it. I'm going to try and find, obviously I can't bury it in the ground, I'm going to try and find a sort of a little slightly hollow platform in a tree that I can leave it in, and see if it doesn't germinate there. But I'm absolutely going to try that. Yeah, good idea. But I think if I planted it in the ground, it wouldn't. I'm pretty sure it wouldn't survive. Not really sure how long it would take for it to germinate. In fact, I've got no idea how long it would take to germinate, and it'll probably only sort of start during the growth season, and the growth season is probably after the 1st of September it'll start. So, but I'm going to put it in place now. remember that over here it doesn't get that cold. I'm sitting here in midwinter in my shirt sleeves, so I see my hat is still on backwards, sorry about that. And although it gets chilly-ish, as long as there's water, a lot of plants will just keep growing. And so I'm be very interested to see if this one does. As you saw with that leopard orchid where we were parked, it was still very green. And so it clearly doesn't go into a state of dormancy like a lot of the other sort of greyish trees that you can see around here do. It's more sort of evergreen. So we'll find a sort of lowish hanging platform and see if we can't plant it in there. Fairly quiet on the mammal front at this stage, other than those magnificent hyenas. There are two species of this orchid, by the way. We had a question about whether you get other orchids. Two species of orchid in the park that I know of. I don't think there are any others. There may be a few in some of the more forested areas in the Lobombo Mountains. Certainly down in Natal there are lots and lots of different kinds of orchids. And if I'm not mistaken, it's not an orchid in the true sense of an orchid. I mean, it doesn't look like an orchid that you'd buy that you'd buy in a pot. So it doesn't have the same petals as a sort of traditional orchid. I think it's mainly called an orchid because it lives as a sort of semi-parasitic or epiphytic plant. It's got petals. It looks like sort of 5 daisy petals. Trying to find an appropriate place to put it. And then of course the trick will be to remember where I put it in this fairly large flower garden we're trying to create. I think the question from Debbie in Ohio, are there any nut trees that are edible here? Sherry, there are a couple of nuts. Well, there are a few. The main one, of course, is the marula tree, which produces an extremely sweet fruit. And if you don't know what a marula tree is, perhaps you're a new viewer or not much of a botanist. Naturally, there are none around me right now. I'll find you a marula tree. Anyway, the females produce delicious fruit, which is highly sought after by animals and people. I really enjoy it. It comes in sort of February time or December time in some areas, and it produces, once the fruit's gone, there's a lovely nut inside, but it's incredibly hard to get out, and you've got to spend a long time, and a lot of the local people have got a very sort of specific and clever technique for smashing the sort of the shell and getting the little pieces of marula nut out. And tastes a bit like walnut. Very nice nuts, but I mean really difficult to get out, much harder than any other nut to get out. And other nuts, I suppose, would be something like a ziziphus or buffalo thorn. They've got a fruit, and once you've eaten the fruit off it, you can eat the seed underneath, and that's normally ground up for coffee and that sort of thing. But not a lot of nuts around the place. So here are some marula trees here on the sort of ridge crest areas. Genre, you know what they are. So these sort of trees here, and look at that, it's starting to sprout already. See that? So that marula tree seems to be starting to produce leaves already, which is, I mean, it's midwinter, so that's very unusual for it to be doing that. It's not the first one I've seen doing it, though. There are a few of them around that seem to be producing leaves already. Now, if I can find a female tree, which that might be, I will go and find a nut and show you. It looks like a little alien head. Right, let's move on slowly from here, and I'll see if I can't find one. I don't want to get out of the vehicle here. There is another vehicle just ahead of us, and I think they're filming a squirrel or something. And if I get out, I will frighten it away. Now we're going to nip quickly across to Jamie, who's got a mongoose in the termite mound, and I'll see you now.
It's moving now. Hi guys, and welcome back. We just wanted to show you this little guy poking his head out, his or her head out of the burrow that these guys are in. So we have a little dwarf mongoose, and they're being uncharacteristically shy at the moment. When I did drive past, most of them disappeared off into the various burrows around this termite mound, but we've still got a nice little visual of this one. I'm not seeing any of the others, and we did have, just a little bit earlier, we had their little contact calls. And dwarf mongoose are probably one of my favorite animals to see out here, just because they are such little characters. Oh, and I think he's popped his head back in. Oh no, there he is. And hopefully if we sit nice and quietly, they might come out and just feel a little bit braver and a little bit bolder. And I have had situations, it did take me a long time to get right, but by sitting still for about 15 minutes and not moving, I was able to get them to come and explore and sniff my car tires. So they can be very curious little creatures. The smallest predator that we have in the Sabi Sands. Come on, little one. You can come out. It's okay. I've been listening to a hornbill, a yellow-billed hornbill calling. Now, I don't know exactly where it is, but it is very common to see... Whoop! Frightened. It's very common to see dwarf mongoose associating with hornbills, so the hornbills will travel with a foraging group of mongoose just to explore whatever they're doing, and they've actually done extensive studies that groups of hornbills, so pairs of hornbill, will stay with one particular group of dwarf mongoose, and they will forage with them, and the dwarf mongoose then have an extra set of eyes that is a little bit higher than they are. Hello, little one. Poking its head out of the grass. Well spotted, Andrew. So they will rely on each other for warning systems, and there was research done into hornbills and dwarf mongoose relationships, and there was a study that showed that if the dwarf mongoose were feeling a little bit cold, a little bit reluctant to come out of their burrows, the hornbills would go and find them first thing in the morning and actually sit outside the burrow and call and wait for them to come out so that they could go off foraging together. It's a nice example of some of the symbiotic relationships that you get out in this area. A perfect example of mutualism, where both species benefit. One of only two sort of communal or species that live together in groups. So the banded and the dwarf mongoose are both found in groups together. But now what we are going to do, so from one shy animal to the next, I'm going to send you across to James, who has a shy little steenbok waiting for you. I'm going to stick out here, and I will see you guys a little bit later.
Hello everybody. we've got a really nice and confiding Steenbok ram here. You can see a ram. He's a ram from the small pencil-like horns sprouting from the top of his skull. And I'm just going to ask Jandre to zoom in underneath his eye while he's looking like that. He's now moved his head, of course. They've got something called a pre-orbital gland, which is, you know, unless you can see it, is pretty difficult to imagine. And it's a gland just under the eye, and they use it to mark their territory. And can you still see it? Not really. No. Anyway, when it looks up again, we'll try and get a look. It looks like a sort of large black teardrop underneath the eye. And Jandre, with this, although he's on what we call the reserve camera, it does have a very powerful zoom. And so we'll see if we can't get a decent look at it there. Got it? There we go. So that pre-orbital gland is what they use to mark their territory. Now around here somewhere will be a female, because this is an adult ram, so it's most likely that there will be a female around the place like this, and they live in little pairs, but hardly ever right next to each other, because it's just a little bit sort of reduces the effectiveness of how small they are and their ability to conceal themselves when they're together. So they stay in visual contact, and they're pretty independently foraging within their little territory that they share as a couple. Actually, normally they very seldom will stand like this. They normally stand dead still until we put the camera on them, and then they run off at a tremendous speed, almost as fast as a far eastern Russian eastern chipmunk, but not quite. There are bullets that move slower than them. Just moving into that very sort of peaceful mid-morning section. There's a nice breeze blowing. The dawn octet has reduced itself to a fairly soporific sonata. Yeah, it's very quiet. Probably sitting at about 22 degrees Celsius, 23 maybe. Very pleasant sitting here, warming in the sun, just like that Steenbok is. I'm sure he's really enjoying the warmth of the sun. They do struggle when it gets very cold, these chaps. And the little robin calling, they're my favorite, of course. Sound of the sun is the robin to me. But Steenbok seems to have found himself something very delicious to eat. Now, not easy for them this time of the year, of course. They're concentrate feeders, so they need to have pretty rich food. And I'm just trying to have a look and see what on earth he's eating there. He's just picking the leaves. We're using our super zoom now, apparently. Jandre is super zooming, and he's eating the leaves of what looks to be a white berry bush. They look like pretty fresh leaves. So the first time I've noticed, and I'm sure you can see it with the super zoom that is on there, you can see how long his coat is. It's much longer than it would be on something like an impala. That's interesting to see. That's because they require, well, I mean, one of the reasons being that they require that much more insulation, being so much smaller. They're pretty vicious little horns he's got there. There you can see the preorbital gland very nicely now. Let's see if he doesn't use it to mark. No, he's too obsessed by feeding. He's actually, I think he is probably under slight nutritional stress. Chandra, I don't know if you can get a shot of his hips there. His hips... Interesting question there about why his eyes are so big. Well, pretty much just like the big bad wolf. His eyes are so big because he needs to see so well. They do look proportionately quite large compared with other antelope species. So why are, I'm just trying to look carefully to see if they are in fact bigger, or if it is not sort of black coloration and the gland that makes them look that much bigger. Now they are definitely slightly larger, probably proportionately, than some of the other antelope species. Remember, they live in this sort of habitat here, where they don't live in thick bush like something like a duiker, and so while hearing is incredibly important to them, they are able to still see. And so I suspect that the sort of more open areas that they live in have resulted in them needing slightly larger eyes in order to avoid predation. So if you look at something like a nyala or a duiker, they've probably got slightly bigger, or the eyes aren't quite as proportionately big, maybe because they don't, they need to be able to use other senses in the thick bush that they live. I'm talking purely from the top of my head though, I'm not entirely sure. I think they do look slightly bigger because of the gland and the coloration around them. He's a magnificent fellow, isn't he? You can see his hip sticking out. He's not necessarily the most healthy. He's such a dainty thing. You can't believe he can survive in an environment like this. This is amazing. This is absolutely amazing. I've never had a steenbok sighting like this before. That was so cool. Isn't that great? That was my best steenbok sighting ever. He just crossed the road behind us, and he will leave him to go about his business. Very nice. Right, on we go. I'm still looking for a female marula tree. The only way I can tell if it's a female or not is whether it's got fruit underneath it. Not sure about that one. A very nice idea from Dr. Debbie. Maybe I can put this bulb near one of the dam cameras, say the Djuma dam cam, and see if we can't, and then everyone can monitor its growth. I think that's a brilliant idea. I'll try and find a place around there. There's a wildebeest bull. That whistle you heard was Jeandre arresting my attention. Jeandre, where? Shall I go forward a bit? Is that alright? Right. There's a wildebeest bull. That whistle you heard was Jeandre arresting my attention. Jeandre, where? Shall I go forward a bit? Is that alright? 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 lovely wildebeest bull. Alone, of course. Not a lot in the way of wildebeest in this area. It's not a typically core area for a wildebeest. There's no sort of obvious water nearby, and it's not particularly open. You know, the other wildebeest territories I've seen are normally pretty open. They've got normally a shade, a midden, and water not too far away. Now, he's not that far from water, but I suspect he's just passing through this area, having a feed, rather than marking any of his territory. This is the same animal, of course, that migrates in such vast herds across East Africa. Up to 2 million of them in the Serengeti Mara system. We have 3 here, I think, maybe 4. It's quite nice to see them like this. Also, I don't know if you can see that they're built very similarly to the hyenas, with the heavy forequarters and very sort of low down or sloping back to smaller hindquarters, and that is an adaptation for stamina. Apparently it's a good design. If you want to run a long distance, that's a good design to be. Very energy efficient, and so while they're not quite as fast as something like a zebra, they can keep running for very lengthy periods, just like a hyena can. Right. So, as the peace of the mid-morning starts to enclose us in a sense of sort of soporific malaise, if you like. I'm starting to feel quite peckish and a little bit tired from this wonderful atmosphere. It's been a magnificent morning. We've seen some incredible hyena. We've had lovely steenbok sighting, and it's just been wonderful to be back in this semi-arid piece of Africa where we are just so privileged to have the access to the animals that we do, to have the space to move in that we do here, and it's just been a real privilege to come back from a place like Russia, which was very beautiful, but to come into the African wilderness like this was just makes you appreciate it all the more. So thank you for welcoming me back with your typical warmth, and thank you very much for all the questions you've asked and the comments you've made, and thank you to Jean-Dre for his camera work and helping me get the leopard orchid out of the tree. But I think this afternoon we'll probably try and find a spot to put this in, and thanks of course to Tara and Kirsty in the final control, where they do multitask with an astonishing array of skill. Now, we're going to leave you now and pop across to Jamie, and I will see you probably, I think, unless something astonishingly amazing happens in the next few minutes, I will see you this afternoon.
So, welcome back everybody, and what an interesting morning it has been. So, from yesterday afternoon, spent sitting with the Birmingham boys, we started out our morning just having a look to see where they'd headed from there. and we tracked them for about 2 kilometers from where they were back up to the Buffelshoek cut line, and they've crossed north. And I have just been listening to my Game Drive channel, and they appear to have been found not too far from where the tracks crossed this morning. So they are around, but they are on Buffelshoek, just north of our boundaries. And just while we're thinking about the Birmingham boys, Dave would like to know if they are large enough in size and in age to take down something prey item like a hippo or something equally large, and if they would do so. They are definitely big enough, I would say, to potentially challenge. However, they might not have the confidence yet to start taking on some of the bigger prey animals. But you will find that lions in certain areas will tend to specialize in different types of prey, especially as times get a little bit tough, and maybe as we start seeing the water holes drying out, there might be a little bit of movement of the hippos and a little bit of conflict. We might start seeing slightly injured hippos or younger bulls being separated from their various rafts, and then maybe, yes, the Birmingham boys could take them on and try and take down some of the larger prey. And you never know, they might become one of those coalitions that specializes in certain types of prey items. So an interesting side of that conversation, I have checked some of our boundary areas just to see if any of the other lion prides are starting to move back towards us. I haven't picked up on anything yet, so they aren't around. But we do know that the Birmingham boys are off Djuma, so hopefully the Unkuhumas and the Sticks will be back. And we'll have an interesting game drive for the sunset safari this afternoon. And we've had some curious antics from James, and it is great to have him back on board with us, especially when he demonstrates exactly why he can be so exciting, climbing up into the tree just to collect that orchid for you guys. So very, very interesting morning. We had a great time with the elephants, and we do apologize for some of the gremlins that were around this morning a little bit earlier. So I'd just like to say a big thank you to all of you guys for joining us on the Sunrise Safari. It has been a great morning and I have enjoyed it, and it is nice and warm. So spring is definitely in the air and on its way back. Thank you very much to Andrew, who's done some amazing camera work today. I've really, really enjoyed it, and I'm sure you guys appreciate it too. And thank you to Tara and Kirsty and FC for all of their hard work. But goodbye, guys. Have a great day, and we will see you this afternoon.